Hello and welcome to Defund the BBC. My name is Calvin Robinson, and joining me this week is Jo Bartosch. Jo is a journalist with bylines in The Telegraph, New Statesman, Independent, and The Spectator. She is also a reporter for the recently launched Lesbian and Gay News, and as well as being a leading campaigner for the protection of women's sex-based rights. Jo, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's lovely to be here.
So let's hit it off with the BBC, who have caused outrage at the start of the year when it came to light that it was teaching young children that there are over 100 gender identities. What do you think is behind the BBC's decision to push this agenda, particularly to small kids?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not at all surprised by their choice to do so. So the BBC are part of the Stonewall Diversity Champion Scheme, and Stonewall is one of those organisations. If I see they're listed, then I know that basically I'll be sacked for expressing my opinion if I were to be employed. So they very much do not represent lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. They are very much a sort of transgender lobby group now. I think as part of their being a diversity champion, they're obviously expected to do things like their pronouns in bios are now expected in their sort of signature lines. BBC staff are now expected. And there are 417 members of staff at the BBC who consider themselves to be either transgender or non-binary, which is obviously a disproportionately large number. I think there's clearly a real need for balanced reporting on issues around gender identity, but the BBC have allowed themselves to become a mouthpiece for some very, very sort of powerful lobby groups like Stonewall, like Mermaids, like Press for Change. And I think it's quite telling in their reporting. So there've been quite a few instances where they've reported crimes that have been committed by men who identify as women. They haven't undergone any changes. They haven't had a gender recognition certificate, and yet the BBC will refer to them as per their preference as women just because they say so. And I think this is really undermining trust in the BBC.
Well, I mean, there's clear bias there from my opinion, but as someone who's written extensively about this issue, has there been a real failure by the BBC to report on gender identity accurately, and how damaging is that in the long term?
Yes, it has. It's been a real sort of failure. There are two exceptions who I feel I do need to mention. So the Newsnight team, there are two people on the Newsnight team who have been consistently good, and that's Hannah Barnes and Deborah Cohen. But they are very much the exception, and I don't know how they've hung on there, frankly. The pressure must be immense. Take, for example, their programming around children with gender dysphoria. So they've made a number of programs like I Am Leo, like First Day, all of which sort of support this idea that it's possible to be born into the wrong body. Now, there's absolutely no evidence that it is possible to be born in the wrong body. And programs like I Am Leo sort of explained this, and it's aimed at children. This is the odd thing. They are very clearly sort of aiming a lot of this programming at kids. And I Am Leo, which was first aired in 2014, had a conveyor belt with sort of, there's toilet door signs for male and female, spraying them different colors, spraying them either pink or blue, depending on the sex. And the idea was that, occasionally the wrong one gets sprayed the wrong color. Whilst this sort of seems trivial, and obviously, it's a difficult concept to explain, the ramifications are seen in women like Keira Bell. So Keira Bell, as you may be aware, and the audience may be aware, is a young woman who believed as a child that she was a boy. She was put on a medical pathway as per the guidance of organisations like Mermaids. She was put on a medical pathway. She had puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, double mastectomy, and then realised that in fact she was same-sex attracted and was just not a particularly girly girl. And this is a real problem. So we know that around 70% or so of those who identify as transgender, as children or young people, are in fact same-sex attracted. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that what's going on here is a form of conversion therapy, and it is very much being sort of promoted and pushed by the BBC. And in lots of their programming, they refer to Mermaids, which is an organisation that purports to help children and young people with gender dysphoria. And of course, having gender dysphoria, the feeling of feeling like you're in the wrong body is quite common, but that's not evidence of being transgender. It's evidence of a mental health problem, essentially. So Mermaids, CEO of Mermaids, took her then 15-year-old child to Thailand to have a full sex change operation. Now that procedure is now illegal, but that is one of the organisations that the BBC has been quite pally with and has been promoting and has been seeking advice from on programming. And I think that's very, very concerning. And young women like Kira Bell are the result. So Kira Bell is now 24. She doesn't know if she will ever be able to have children. She has no breasts, so she won't be able to breastfeed them. And I think the dereliction of duty on the part of the BBC has played a significant role in the experiences of young detransitioners like Kira Bell.
It's incredibly worrying, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
The constant shoddy journalism. The BBC reported cases of, you mentioned puberty blockers there. They mentioned that halting the use of puberty blockers could cause children to commit suicide. Do you think it's this lazy reporting on their behalf, or do you think there's something more calculated going on here?
I mean, that's nonsense. That's not true at all, just to set the record straight. And I believe one of the organisations that promoted that idea was, again, Mermaids. And actually, funny enough, on a BBC interview, she did admit that that was anecdotal. But I think part of the reason, I think, is an attempt to try and sort of attract in younger viewers. And I think they think they sort of unthinkingly think it's a woke sort of youth agenda. And if they sort of play to it, they will pull in and attract younger viewers. So yeah, I think that's probably part of it, is a sort of a bias towards trying to attract in younger viewers, which is ridiculous because nobody really, I don't think, under 30 watches the BBC.
Absolutely. And the BBC has a well-documented obsession with diversity as well, doesn't it? But it seems only the right kind of identity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, never ideological diversity. That's not tolerated.
No. And when it comes to LGBT, for example, they broadcast a relentless stream of drag and trans programming, while lesbians are non-existent. How damaging do you think that is for young girls?
Oh, incredibly. I mean, I think sort of having sort of out positive lesbian role models is, I mean, I'm bisexual myself, but I'm in a same-sex relationship, and I know it really helps to see yourself out there in some respects. But I think it's sort of diversity tick boxing and sort of shoehorning things in rather than just having it as something, you know, everyday and incidental, making a big fuss about it, isn't particularly helpful. And I think you end up, I mean, with things like the sort of the close relationship they have with Stonewall. I mean, they pay money to Stonewall to be members of the diversity champion scheme. So I think with things like that, it's actually, they're an ideological organisation. They're not about advocacy. So I mean, you know, the belief that everybody has a gender identity is part of that ideology. And that's not about supporting individuals. That's about sort of it's a religion, essentially. It's the same thing as a religion. It's you might as well believe in gendered souls. Yeah, I think that's very concerning.
Yeah, I mean, Stonewall and Mermaids have a very extreme ideology, I would say. They're political institutions or political organizations that are not bipartisan in any way. So for the BBC to be leaning in their favor is showing a bias, which is worrying. But you mentioned earlier a topic similar to this, that you probably remember the headline, actually, the Blackpool woman that was accessed child abuse images in a hospital bed. And given the BBC's media dominance, how important do you think it is for the corporation to lead the way in accurately reporting when a trans-identified biological man is involved in a sex crime?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. So we know that 98% of sexual violence is committed by men. And in UK law, rape can only be committed by a man using his penis. That is in the legislation. So to sort of report in a sort of nonsensical way, according to the preference of quite often, you know, violent offenders, is absolutely flying in the face of both common sense and I think women's dignity. Actually, it's really quite insulting.
Absolutely. And to wrap up, Defund the BBC always recommends that people legally cancel their TV license. However, 72% of those prosecuted for breaking licensing rules are female, despite women only accounting for 25% of all other crimes. So is the BBC using methods of policing that discriminate against women, or have women just really had it with the BBC?
Really interesting. And I didn't know that.
Fine, I tend to think it's that they tend to catch women at home more than they catch men at home.
Oh yes, that's the obvious solution, isn't it? Yeah.
and people aren't always aware that you don't have to let the TV license inspectors into your property.
No, I didn't know that.
They tend to prey on the vulnerable, I think, which is discriminatory in a different way. But Jo, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.